Looking at our world from a theological perspective. This is the Theology Central Podcast, making theology central.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is Tuesday, March the 19th, 2024. It is currently 1:18 p.m. Central Time, and I am coming to you live from the Theology Central studio, located right here in Abilene, Texas. I hope you're having a great day. I was sent an email earlier this morning, and well, what I want to do is simply provide you the information that was sent to me, and hopefully it will be beneficial. Hopefully it will be helpful to someone. But before we go there, I at least want to try to, lay down some foundation for this information, try to give you something that may be practical to challenge you a little bit. As you have heard me say over and over on this podcast, that sometimes I have to ask myself, what are people actually getting for the money they give to keep a church operating, right? All this money goes to pay for the building, the electricity, the staff, and what are you actually getting from that support? What is the church actually producing in the amount of teaching and the sermons, what they make available online, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of times people, and I've asked this question, where do you get most of your spiritual food from? What has been the source to help you most growing spiritually? And remember, I was shocked, and all of the emails I received, not one person said, my local church. They pointed to this ministry or this podcast or this or this or this or this. And you're like, well, wait a minute. But you get up, you drive to that church, you give money to that church, you give your time, you give your talent, but everything else is the thing that's feeding you spiritually. Everything else is the thing that's helping you, encouraging, challenging you, edifying you, equipping you, teaching you. I sometimes am baffled by that, but there seems to be a truth to it. So I always get frustrated because then I will see something online going, hey, this ministry is making this all available. And you're like, well, wow, that's enough spiritual content to feed me for the next 10 years. But why do I need the local church then, right? It can be frustrating because to me, it should be local churches providing so much spiritual food that the people don't know, they don't need anything else. In fact, they don't have time for anything else, okay? But, in reality, it doesn't work that way. So I'm always asking that question. And then the second thing, so first is, what are you actually getting? What is actually being produced by churches that requires so much money to operate, right? And I think that's a good question to ask. I know it may seem like a fleshly question, but I think it's a good question. And then second, what is the deal with study after study after study coming out telling us that Christians today are biblically and theologically illiterate? Now, what the people, when they are challenged on this, they always blame their local church. Then they're like, well, my local church wasn't equipping me. My local church never taught this. My local church didn't teach church history. My local church did not teach systematic theology. My local church did not teach hermeneutics. So they blame the local church. They blame the local church, which then goes back to point one. If you are going to a church and you're theologically, biblically illiterate, you don't know hermeneutics, you don't know church history, you don't know all of these issues, well, then why are you continuing to support a church? You just as well pull your support. You may want to attend, but you should then give your money to the organizations that are actually feeding you spiritually. Now, you can say, some people can say, well, that's not biblical, but why are you supporting the thing not helping you spiritually? But yet they will go and they will give and they in some cases will be loyal, but they're relying on everyone else to feed them spiritually. It's like, I'm going to go here. I'm going to give you my money. I'm going to give you my attention, my focus, my time. And then when I'm confronted that I'm spiritually and theologically and biblically illiterate, I'm going to say, well, it's my church's fault. And so then you're like, I'm going to fix it. So then you go rely on all of these other ministries to help you out while you don't support them. It's almost a maddening scenario, but study after study constantly shows that we've got something wrong in American Christianity. And it's been talked about for years. We've got this epidemic of illiteracy. How are we going to fix it? And it's always usually parachurch ministries stepping up, trying to find a way to fix it. And it's like, no, the local church should be fixing it. But then we're right back to point number one. So point number one, what are you actually getting from the local church? And number two, why are Christians still so biblically illiterate? They blame the local church, but here's the thing. Should Christians be blaming anyone for their biblical illiteracy? Because we live in a time where you have so much available to you. Christians today should know more about the Bible than any other generation of Christians who have ever lived. Christians today should know theology. They should know church history. They should know hermeneutics. They should know everything because it's all available to them in the palm of their hand on their phone 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's no excuse for you not knowing other than you don't want to know. Now, I used to put the blame at the church. I used to blame the church. Now I'm tired of blaming the church because it's the individual's fault. Because it's their fault because they have access to everything. So then it comes down to, why do Christians not want to actually learn? So what are you actually getting from the church? And then why are Christians still so biblically illiterate? Those are two, I think, very important concepts that I want you to think about. But I say all of that simply to lay the foundation for what we're about to talk about. Because I'm going to point you once again to another resource that's going to be made available in April. You can pre-register today. We're going to read about it and give all the details. Now, this is, last night I talked about a subject that I'm very much connected with. Well, I'm very much connected with this subject as well, because the thing that's going to be made available is a Bible Institute that I was a student in and I graduated from. I completed all the course of study and I have my diploma/certificate somewhere. I'd have to find it. It's in my box of diplomas and certificates and all the things I've gotten from seminary, Bible college, Bible institutes, because anytime I could find something that I could attend and I could afford, or I could get the military to pay for, I went to the school and got whatever. I didn't care about the diplomas or the degrees, or I didn't care about any of that. I just cared about the learning. So there was an institute made available many years ago. I signed up, boom, went through it relatively quick, got all the certificate and was very grateful and had a good time with it. Even though I disagreed with a lot of the theology, there was just something. I enjoyed the experience. And look, I went to schools that were amillennial. I went to schools that were premillennial. I went to schools that were covenantal theology. I went to schools that were, dispensational. I went to, you name the kind of school. If I could go, I pursued a degree in Catholic theology from a Catholic university. Anywhere I could go, I would go because I wanted to learn. So I'm very familiar with this particular school, but then it disappeared. It just went gone. It just disappeared. And then the person whose name was attached to the school, to the Bible Institute, well, he passed away. So then you're like, okay, well, that was a great time. And so sometimes I regret, I'm like, I wish I would have, I at one point I had all of those files saved on a computer somewhere. And I wish, sometimes I'm like, man, I wish I could go back and find those files and find the audio files and find the books. And because it would be just fun to sit back and just kind of go back through all of that again. Well, it appears that it's coming back. And you have a possibility to be a part of it. This is what was sent to me. I don't know at what time this morning I could look up the email, but I'm not going to look up the email. I'm just going to go to the article. They sent me a link to an article that was published today, March the 19th, 2024. So this is hot off the presses. Where's my paper? Oh, here we go. It's hot off the presses. It's hot off the press. Are you ready? There you go. Does that make it sound official? Even though this paper that has nothing to do with the actual article because the article's on my iPad, but tapping it. But it's hot off the press, okay? This is brand new information. Are you ready? Here we go. Here is the headline. Charles Charles Stanley Ministry to launch free online learning platform on the anniversary of his death. Charles Stanley's ministry, In Touch, they're going to launch a free online learning platform on the anniversary of his death. Now, as soon as I saw it, I'm like, oh, I wonder if this is going to be the Institute. I wonder if the Institute's coming back. Oh, I hope so. And I hope it's exactly like it was. I hope it's identical. I hope that everything is the same. Maybe they could do that. Now, there were some things I offered as possible improvements because they had a lot of things were obviously taken from the teaching of Charles Stanley, but it was like in print form. And I was always like, well, give me the link to the audio. Now, in some cases, they had the link to the audio, and then they did make improvements over time. And there was a lot of good things. Sometimes I would like, but this is also in one of his books. Give me the link to the book. I'll buy the book. So because I wanted to have it all together. So maybe they will have made some of those improvements. But I was like, I'm hoping it's the I'm hoping it's the Institute. That's what I was thinking because I wanted to go back and relive it. So here's the story. The ministry, once founded and led by the Southern Baptist pastor Charles Stanley, will be launching a free online Christian education platform on the 1-year anniversary of his death. In Touch Ministries, which Stanley had founded in the 1970s, announced they will be launching. Now, let me stop right here before I tell you what they're launching. Once again, here's what we have. Now, In Touch Ministries, obviously the sermons, the video sermons, the audio sermons came from his church. So there was a church involved in some of the material, but once again, it was almost separate from the church. Like it wasn't your local church. It was In Touch Ministry since the 1970s, providing all of this content for people around the world. And look, I disagree with a lot of Charles Stanley's theology, but let me tell you, I'm here in the studio right now. I'm just looking around. I got books everywhere. I can almost guarantee, yes. Okay. I'm going to get out of my chair. I knew that if I just looked around long enough, I would find a Charles Stanley book, right? I knew if I looked around. And I got books everywhere. And look here, Charles F. Stanley, Landmines and the Path of the Believer workbook. Here's the workbook I had for his book on landmines. I have the hard copy of the book. I think the hard copy of the book is at the church library. But I have the book. I had the workbook. I had the sermon series. I've got Charles Stanley books scattered all over the place. And I've got books everywhere. Wherever I've got books, there's Charles Stanley books because I discovered him early on. Now, I did not find him as theologically in depth. I did not find him academic. It was very simple. It was very straightforward. It almost gave me, Charles Stanley's materials always made me I wish Christianity was as simple as this. Like, hey, there was just kind of like a simple, oh, shucks, kind of his Southern accent, kind of just, isn't Christianity just simple? Like there was a simplicity to it that in some ways I was drawn to because I'm like, I wish that's the way it was, but I realized it was nowhere close to that simple. And sometimes I would come to him just for the simplicity, the devotional type nature, the, very practical. And then I would take a break from all of the academic, theological, philosophical confusion, disagreements and struggle. And I'm just going to spend some time in the simple. I'm going to spend and the devotional. So that's kind of what I ran to Charles Stanley for. And so I listened to his radio program, In Touch. I bought his books. I even used, when I was teaching my daughters how to take sermon notes, because they always had a notebook, and we didn't want to make church a negative experience. We wanted to make it fun. So we try to teach them that there's points in a sermon, right? Sometimes those points are clearly articulated. Sometimes they're not. I mean, until they started listening to me preach, and then it was like, well, I don't follow those rules. But we wanted them to have a basic structure. So we would use Charles Stanley's television program, because he would put on the screen point number 1, point number 2. And so then at first, when they didn't really know how to write, we're like, okay, listen to the point and just draw a picture that represents the point. Like if he mentions Jesus doing something, just draw a picture of that, right? So then we would have like four blocks on their page and say, just draw a picture of anything that relates to something you hear in the sermon. And then finally, as they got older, then we translated that into now, write out the 4 points. And now, okay, so that kind of thing. So his ministry was greatly not influential on my preaching, definitely not influential on my theology. In fact, I would argue his theology drove me away from his theology, especially how to hear from God, and because almost God talking outside of the Bible. Very much influenced by Andrew Murray. We could get into all of the influence, but so his ministry there. But once again, what do you have? You have a ministry outside of a local church that are outside of the individual's local churches, the people listening who are being fed spiritually from him and not from their local church. There are people who go to church Sunday after Sunday who was more spiritually fed by In Touch Ministries than they were their local church. Now, you can say, whose fault? I blame the local church, because the local church could be producing more content than In Touch Ministries produced. You say, well, that would be a lot of work. I know. That's kind of like what the pastors are supposed to be doing, right? But here we go. So In Touch Ministries was founded in the 1970s. They announced that they will be launching the Charles Stanley Institute. Oh, that sounds like what I was a graduate from. The Charles Stanley Institute, with it beginning operations on April the 18th. Today is March the 19th. April the 18th is the date. Now, I'm going to give you the web address. Go to Charles Stanley Institute, all run together, charlesstanleyinstitute.org. charlesstanleyinstitute.org. It's all run together, charlesstanleyinstitute.org. When you get there, it says coming April the 18th, 2024. Then it has a photograph of these mountains. I guess maybe the sun is coming up or the sun is going down. Okay. It says Charles Stanley Institute. It says pre-register today. You click on pre-register, and then there's the pre-register form. You need to come up with a username, email, password, confirm the password, first name, last name, your country. Then you can click on you agree to receive emails from Charles Stanley Institute, and you agree to receive additional information from In Touch Ministries, the parent organization of the Charles Stanley Institute. So you can register. And then if you go down, they have, what is the Charles Stanley Institute? Welcome to the Charles Stanley Institute. Would you like to grow in your relationship with Jesus and learn how to walk in his amazing plan for your life? Then you're at the right place. The Charles Stanley Institute is the disciple training arm of In Touch Ministries. It exists to provide believers like you with sound, Bible-based, Christ-centered, Holy Spirit-filled instruction so you can know God, learn to listen to him, and experience the abundant Christian life for which he created you. The Charles Stanley Institute is coming April the 18th, 2024. Pre-register today. Then they have a little bit more here. We've saved you a seat. And right now they don't give you any information about classes or what they're going to offer. Nothing along that lines. It goes on to say, in a statement emailed to the Christian Post on Monday, In Touch Ministries explained that the initiative will become the disciple training arm of In Touch Ministries, providing seekers and believers with in-depth biblical instruction based on Charles Stanley's more than 50 years of inspirational messages. Now, what I love about that is he preached for 50 years. All that content could just turn into dust, but they're going to take it and do something with it. That's, hey. And it looks like they're going to make it available for free. Come on now. That is amazing. That is amazing. It goes on to say, in each class, students will begin with his sermons and then dive deeper into the spiritual truths he presented through new scripture-centered materials, instructional videos, Bible studies, and leader guides that explore the points further stated the ministry. All right. It says the Institute was the last big project Dr. Stanley signed off on before he passed away. All right. Well, I don't know if they're going to mention this. It was in existence before. It doesn't look like the Christian Post either knows this or the ministry didn't bother to tell him that. So I don't know. I don't know why they didn't mention it, but I know because if I go down and I look, I can probably find my certificate and show you that I was a graduate from it. Not that it means anything. Just means I know that the school, that it existed in some form in the past. And I don't know why it went away. It just like disappeared. They didn't really announce much. They just like, it exists. Now it's gone. And now it is back. And the announcement dropped today, March the 19th. It will be available on April the 18th. Go to, if I can get you to the website, Charles Stanley Institute, all run together, charlesstanleyinstitute.org. Sign up and learn. Now, you do need to be aware of the following theological issues that I disagree with. Clearly, he's not reformed in his soteriology. So he definitely would believe in an Arminian free will type of understanding of salvation. Clearly semi-Pelagian. Clearly, there's times it almost scared me that he almost hinted at full-blown Pelagianism, but semi-Pelagian at best, okay? He clearly believed God could, God reveals himself or speaks to us in like some inner, still small voice that you hear outside of the Word of God, which I have a problem with, and very much into, I don't know what we call this. It's kind of like this, there's a deeper spiritual life you can have, and it involves your surrender, this like a deep surrender, the surrendered life, this truly blessed life. And it comes a lot from the writings of Andrew Murray. In fact, I think Charles Stanley, and we talked about this a couple of years ago, even in his preaching, he talked about a time in his Christian life where I think he was a brand new pastor and he was just spiritually dry, and it was just like he was in a bad place spiritually. And then I think he was reading the works of Andrew Murray, which, boom, he found the deeper spiritual life. And then that changed his ministry. Well, then he went on to this little small church. He ends up now becoming a pastor of basically a mega church in this huge ministry. So he would tell you the secret to his ministerial success was finding this like deeper spiritual life. So there would be issues I would strongly not agree with, but what have I always said? You should learn and listen and be exposed to ideas that you don't agree with, because you know why? That should challenge you to grow and learn more so that you can take their hypotheses, their perspective, and you can challenge it scripturally. And guess what you'll do? You'll learn their perspective, and then you'll be challenged to figure out exactly what you believe and probably grow even deeper in your understanding by being challenged by that which you don't agree with. Okay, so there you have it, the Charles Stanley Institute. So it kind of comes back. Every church in America could probably provide a similar thing, some form of institute. They could put it online. They could do this. They could. But they don't. They have these buildings with all these empty classrooms that are usually empty Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. But they don't do anything with them. They could. In many cases, they've got multiple people on staff. Some churches even have people who their entire job is their audio, visual, media department, where they are doing things on a website. They could. No, they don't. So guess what? You may be going to a church, but you may be spending Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday learning from the Charles Stanley Institute or some other similar place of learning. BBN, the Bible Broadcasting Network, BBN Radio. They have their own Bible Institute. Once again, that is free. You listen to audio, you take tests. I've gone through the BBN Bible Institute, I don't know, multiple times. And sometimes I want to go back and do it again, right? So guess what? It's available for free. I can point you to resources all day. Millions of podcasts, sermons, millions of sermons, books, PDF files, videos. There is not a lack of spiritual food. Sometimes people say we're in a famine of hearing God's word. Ridiculous. We're drowning in spiritual content. We don't even know where to begin. And so much of it, people are learning and benefit from it, those who do participate in it. And it has nothing to do with their local church. Nothing to do at all with their local church. And what I want to challenge is, local churches need to do more, or it calls into question why they even exist. And I think in some ways people need to consider, if I'm getting all my spiritual food from here, why am I giving my money there? Now, I'm not saying that's a biblical way to think, but I think it's a challenge. It's a challenge. It's a challenge. I mean, name the platform. You can literally sit there all day with a notebook, a Bible, and listen to sermon after sermon after sermon after sermon on the Sermons 2.0 app. So who's feeding you more, your local church or sermon audio? Well, maybe you just give your money to sermon audio or to the broadcasters on there. And I'm not even pointing towards me. This is not about me. This is just about the reality of all the things out there. So what is the local church going to do? How does it respond to that? Most cases, it doesn't do much. I mean, look, the local church in many cases have already just completely gave up their responsibility to train men for ministry by saying, oh, you want to be in ministry? Well, go off to Bible college, go off to seminary. Why isn't the church training them in? What better place to get training for ministry than in an actual ministry where they can do actual ministry? You say, well, they need that seminary education. Why? When most sermons are so dumbed down, you don't even need a seminary. You go to school to get all the education that you're not supposed to be giving out from the pulpit because the people can't handle it. Oh, I've heard that my whole life. But I really want to just drive it home. Your ignorance of anything theologically, your ignorance of anything hermeneutically, your ignorance of anything about church history, any of it, that's on you. That's on you. Because the availability to learn is there. You just have to want it. So I would challenge you to go to charlesstanleyinstitute.org today. March the 19th. Pre-register. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know. I can't wait to see it just because, well, I've gone through it. So maybe I get to kind of relive that. And there was a lot of positive gain from it because I was going through a lot of spiritual turmoil and upheaval in my life around some of that time. I think my seizure disorder, I think, was really starting to kick in. And I was just having a lot of questions and doubts about everything in my life. And there was just there was a simplicity, a devotional nature to it that was at least somewhat comforting at that time. So, but go in knowing it's definitely got a different theology than the person who's speaking to you right now. But you know what? That's good. Because you know what's going to happen. You know, I've already pre-registered. So you know what's going to happen. Oh, come on, you can guess. You're going to hear what I'm learning on here on the podcast. It's going to transfer to the podcast in some way, shape, or form. Sometimes it may be good broadcast. Sometimes it may be bad broadcast, but you're going to get it. So you can just go ahead and sign up for it and be ready to go. But I wanted to take a few minutes, 29 minutes exactly, to try to give you some information, and hopefully it will be beneficial. So I needed to make this somewhat brief. So there you go. Hopefully that was brief enough. But I didn't want to just say, hey guys, there's this institute, go check it out. I wanted to kind of, put it as an introduction, body, and dramatic conclusion. And I don't have a dramatic conclusion. CharlesStanleyInstitute.org. This just raises the questions that I continue to raise. All the money and effort to keep local churches going, and what are you getting from them? And you've got all this content available. What are you doing with it? What are you doing with it? Email me, newsif@yahoo.com. That's newsif@yahoo.com. Newsif@yahoo.com. Everyone have a wonderful day. Don't forget your theonomy assignment. The theonomy assignment. I don't know what's going on. The numbers for that message is like the lowest in the history of humankind. We've got to be talking about theonomy, ladies and gentlemen. Some of you who are participating in the theonomy assignment, you have emailed me of your total shock and dismay of how many messages on the Sermons 2.0 app are pro-theonomy. Some of you are like, what in the world? I can't, one individual, he emailed me and he said something along the lines of how frustrated he was getting listening to whatever sermon it was, trying to basically say, we're going to put this law on even the unregenerate. And the emailer said that he was probably breaking all of the 10 commandments just listening to the sermon. And, because it was frustrating him, the sermon. But hey, I still want you 3 pro-theonomy messages and then 3 critiques or anti-theonomy messages. Please listen to at least 6. That's what you're supposed to be doing this week. It's Tuesday. You still got plenty of time. But let's make use of that theonomy assignment, okay? By the end of this week, I want all of you to be experts on theonomy and try to draw the distinction between theonomy and theocracy. And where does Christian nationalism fit in the middle of all of that? What is the arguments for theonomy? What are the arguments against theonomy? And don't forget to go to theologycentral.net and go to the blog section, because I got that picture of the downward descent from Christianity to theocracy. Remember, go look at that picture. It's theologycentral.net, and go look at it. All right, there we go. Someone with a very loud truck is driving by. Do they not respect the broadcast? I don't know. I don't know why they don't. Okay, all right. Everyone have a great day. newsif@yahoo.com. That's newsif@yahoo.com. Everyone have a great day. I got to go. God bless.